So welcome to our next webinar series. Today we are going to be learning more about how to use the Scramble and Guess lesson templates. So thank you for joining. Hopefully you'll be able to learn a lot from this. We'll have time at the end for some Q&A and get through all of your questions as well. So I'm going to start by sharing with you my Snowflake screen. All right, so we're going to be creating today 2 of our different lessons, and we're going to be using the templates for Scramble and for the Guess lesson type. So these are 2 lessons that are really good when doing vocabulary review or teaching language skills, and they are found right here. So we have our Guess, which is like a guess the word. So you would put in a word and students would try to guess the letters that make up that word. And then Scramble is very similar to a word search. So I'm going to start first with the Guess lesson type. I've used this a lot with my middle schoolers. We did a lot of vocabulary. So we would use this as a way to review some of those key vocabulary concepts, especially with my 6th graders who were learning world history and ancient world history at that. So trying to learn things like the word sarcophagus when we were talking about ancient Egypt, this made it so it was really easy for them to just remember those terms and also help with the spelling skills as well. So when I open up the lesson, this is the template that I get. And the left side is where I will be creating my information, creating my content. The right side is going to give me the preview, and you see right now it's empty because I haven't put anything in. And it's also going to allow me to change some certain specs of that. So whenever I begin with creating a lesson, I always make sure I title it first, because if you're anything like me as a teacher, sometimes you get distracted and forget what you're doing and then have to go back to it later and realize, like, wait, what was I making that lesson on? So for now, I'm just going to title this demo, since that's what we're doing. So with this particular lesson type, you have 2 options. You can create a group or you can create content. When you create a group, 2 tabs pop up. The top tab is going to be where you would input like a clue. The bottom tab would be where you would put the word. So in this case, I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm going to say, something related to animals. So that would be my clue. And then with the content, I would create maybe a list of animals, like a cat, a dog, a rooster. And all of those would be in that one spot. It's almost like creating a round. So as students guess those words, that clue is still going to be the same for all of them. When I hit create content, it gives me the same option where I can put in a word. So we'll try the word cow, but without the clue attached to it. I can also move things around as I've created them. So I can add things to my different pieces. So for this one, I'm going to show you how to do it with using the different groups to do kind of the different clues. And I'm keeping with that animal theme because that's easy. That's something everyone kind of knows and recognizes. So I'm going to say this animal meows. My answer would be a cat. And this animal moos. This would be a cow. So I have kind of my really, really basic, really straightforward and easy vocab words that my students might be learning. Once I've done this, I can then go and I can change some of the specifications of this lesson. I can change the font style. So we have a couple different options to choose from. I can change the color of the text. I can add a shadow to the text or not. So when I remove the shadow, sometimes the shadow just makes it so it's a little easier to see if you're maybe seated towards the back of the classroom or further from the board. Gives it a little bit more depth. For other students, it could be a little bit of a distraction. So it's something that you'd have to just really know your students to decide what would work best. So that's how I changed the font. The other option that we have, and we have this with all of our lessons, is the ability to change themes. So right now it's defaulted to our Snowflake theme. We also have a lot of different themes to choose from that just make it a little bit more fun and more personalized. Maybe you want to make it a little scary, so you can do the dungeon theme. I like to use that with my middle schoolers, especially around Halloween. Or maybe you want to make it, kind of fun and silly, or since we're learning animals, I would probably put maybe a jungle theme. So it just changes kind of the startup. When my students would go to play this lesson, it opens almost like a little movie. So it loads into it to give them kind of a preview before the lesson begins. I also have the option, if I want to choose one of the pre-created Snowflake templates, I also have the option where I can select my own background. So I can go to background. I can go from the content gallery. And within the content gallery, these are all templates that have already been loaded in and created by members of the NUITEQ team that relate to various categories. So under nature, I might see some animal template that I'd want, and I can select that, like this African savanna, and that would change the background. I also have the option of changing background by connecting it to images in OneDrive or in my Google Drive. I also could do an image search. So this would just pull up images from just a basic, almost Google search. So I might want to look for animals. And it would pull up a variety of different images to choose from. And again, I would just have to select which animal I wanted, this crazy looking horse. And then there we go, there's my image. And then I can also select images from my own device. So by selecting Browse, it would open up your folder on your computer and it could show what images you would have on your desktop that you'd want to load in. So if you've already saved things, or if you've created your own background images, this is where you would be able to find them. At our NUITEQ team, we have a really great core group of teachers who are constantly creating new backgrounds and creating lessons with really individualized, specific instructions with it, and really excellent, beautifully done graphics as the backgrounds. The next part of creating one of my guest lessons would be the gameplay, and this would be how do I want my students to play this lesson. You have the option of ordered, which it's already defaulted to, so that means that the words would go in order. So the order that they're listed, that's the order that students would guess. The other option is randomized. And randomized means they would go in any order. The thing that I really enjoy doing with randomized, whenever I would create a lesson with my students with vocabulary, I could then select randomized, and then I would divide my board into separate zones. So usually we would do about 2 zones. My middle schoolers are a little bit bigger, and my board was mounted to the wall. If you have your board able to go into tabletop mode, or if it's lower and you have more kids, you could do it definitely in 4 zones. And with randomized, when it's set in those 4 zones, the lesson's going to play with the exact same content, but it's going to all be in a totally different order. So my students wouldn't be able to just glance over at what their neighbor was writing or answering and try and cheat and steal their words. They'd have to do their own words for it. My middle schoolers loved this, especially when we would do activities that had some sort of competition. So we would divide our board into 2 zones. We'd have the same lessons up there. And we might do a contest of, boys versus girls, or the left side versus the right side, or students who are wearing school colors that day, or whatever. We'd figure out some way to divide up, and they would have a little contest of guessing the words. And it was really great to see how they would strategize. With my 6th graders, I taught 3 different sections, and I'd have the one class where they would just be shouting at one another and lots of blurting out, trying to guess, and really collaborative. And then I'd have other classes that would work really quietly and try and strategize, looking at, okay, there's this many letters in the word. Let's look back at our vocab in our notebook. Let's see which words have, 5 letters or whatever. And so it was a really great, it worked well with diversifying that type of education for my kids so that they can make it their own. They could decide how they wanted to play, and I just gave them the tools to do it. So it was really fun. So that's with the rules, that's randomized. The other option is you can include a timer. When you select timer, you can set how long you want students to be participating in this particular activity. So I might set my timer for 2 minutes. This would be, again, really great if you were doing that station rotation model of students working on different zones, doing different activities. And then when the timer goes off, they would maybe rotate to the next zone. So here you have the timer already set in. Once I've created my lesson and I'm happy with the way it looks, I would hit play just to preview it first before I would send it to my students. You'll see I'm creating all of this on our snow.live platform. I loved that feature. That was really great in being able to allow my own time to kind of meet when I was making like my lesson plan. So I could be working on a lesson at home from the comfort of my couch. I could be working on a lesson, waiting for my car to be serviced. So wherever I was, since it was remote mobile, I could do it anywhere. And then that lesson would save and I could play it in my classroom on the board, which was a really great tool. So when you play it, when you create it, it does save in so that you can upload it onto your Snowflake account onto your board. So here we have my lesson set up. I can decide, again, if I wanted my students to have it with capital letters or lowercase. This is really good for your little learners, depending on how they're learning their letters. You can see the timer is going. And very simply to play guess, you try to guess the word. Since it's set at randomized, that was my category. I just had to think of animals. I would select letters. If I get it wrong, you'll see that I've lost a heart. If I answer it correctly, you see that the letter appears. And once students select all of the letters correctly, so I know that this one was cat, they get their star, and then they can move on to the next one. And my timer is still ticking down, so they still have that set amount of time to participate in that activity. So I go ahead back to edit. The other feature in creating these lessons, and this is again on all of our lessons, is the ability to have lesson information. Under lesson information, you have an opportunity for descriptions. So I could write, this lesson is about animals. And I can include whatever else I'd want to for my description. You also have the opportunity to add YouTube videos. You can directly copy and paste a YouTube link if you have a video already selected, or by hitting search, it will pull up the YouTube videos for us. We default to our Snowflake lesson series, or I can search animal songs. I would recommend as a teacher though, and I'm sure we're all aware, always preview before you play something. I did check this one out. This was a fun video, and now I can have that video set. I can have that video show before my lesson. So when I hit play, the video would pop up first, or I can have it just attached as a separate resource and I can use that maybe in a different activity, but I know that it's there. I also have the ability to determine my start and my end point. Maybe the first 20 seconds of the video were really boring, or were an introduction, or didn't relate to what I was trying to teach that day. I can cut that out, and I can also decide, okay, I don't want to show a 5-minute video. Maybe I want to show the 20 seconds through the first minute or first minute and a half, and I can change those specifications. So I have the ability to kind of edit my video to be as long or as short as I'd like it to be. And then once I hit play, that video would appear at the beginning. The other option I have under lesson information is I have the ability to change my age group. So my category of students, what age range would they be in? Would they be the really little kids? Are they my middle schoolers, early high school, and then upwards? I also have the ability to assign it a subject. So maybe this is something we were doing in English class. And then country, you can default it to your own country. These options allow it so that if you do choose to save your lesson to the community, any other teacher who is looking for a lesson about animals or about whatever you've made, this would filter it so that they could search by more specific pieces of content. I also have the opportunity where I can assign web links to it. Maybe I have an outside resource for a PDF that I want my students to complete, or I have a website I want them to visit. This was a lesson about animals. Maybe I wanted to add a link to a zoo, and they could go on a virtual tour and look at real animals. So that's an option that I have, and I can add a variety of different links. Just by hitting the plus button, it'll drop down and add more links to it. Keywords are your tags that would allow you to be able to search for lessons. So this would be about animals. So any words, any features that were in it. Maybe it was a spelling list. Maybe it relates to grade 1. So maybe it's, all about dogs. Whatever tags that relate to that lesson, you can add those in. The other option you have is to add standards to your lesson. Now at the team at NUITEQ, whenever we are designing lessons, we make sure that we select all of these, that we have something, that we know what age group we've designed the lesson for, the content, the countries. We add a lot of keywords and tags, and then we always try and make sure that our lessons are standard aligned. In the community, we have over 100,000 lessons. Many of them are aligned. We're currently working through assigning or creating lessons to align to all of the Common Core standards, which you can see has defaulted to the top. But you'll see that we have standards for a variety of different locations and states and regions. We also have the option where you can search by maybe specific words. So if I wanted to search for animals, and then it would pull up for me all of the standards that relate to animals, and then I could pick. Maybe I didn't remember exactly what my standard was, but I know that it had to do with a certain thing. So that is the basic process of creating the lesson. So I'm going to take a second and pause. I'm going to stop sharing this screen for a moment and see if there's any questions that you have about creating a guest lesson type. All right. So if there's no questions, I'll hop over, I'll share my screen again, and we will move on to the next type of lesson, which is creating a lesson using the Scramble lesson template. If at any point too that I'm going too fast, please let me know. I can always slow down. I can answer any questions along the way. All right, so we just created using guess, which is really great for vocabulary words. Another great lesson for vocabulary is the Scramble, and it's very similar to a word search. So you'll see that Scramble is designed, it looks very similar to the guess lesson type. Again, I'm going to name it Demo 2. Instead of having the option of those for those different categories or rounds, this is just going to be just words. So, and I'm going to still stick with that animals theme since it's easy. So I would add in my words. There we go. So we'll just do those 4 for now. So once I've added those words, you can see in my preview, the words do appear off to the side. You can see the boxes where the students would have to try and find those words. And I can customize this. I can make it very simple by reducing the grid size, or I can make it so there's a lot more. So when I change my grid size, you can see it has a lot more letters. So when you do have those longer vocabulary words, you do need to change the grid size, and this goes all the way up to 20. With the Scramble lesson type, you can have up to 20 words, and the words need to be at least 3 letters long and then up to 20 letters long. So if you do have more in the list, it's only going to take those first 20. I want to make this just a little tinier so you can see it. I also have the option where I can enable or disable my word list. Right now, you can see those words. So maybe with my younger students, I would want to keep the words there so that they could go and look. But if I wanted to make it more challenging, I can take the word list away, and now the entire screen just then becomes that Scramble that they have to search. And again, I can also change if I want it to be uppercase or lowercase words, depending on the needs of my students. Just like in our guest lesson type, you have the ability to change the font. We can change the theme. So it's awfully cold in the North Country right now. I think a beach theme would make me feel a little bit happier. Or again, I can add my backgrounds through the content gallery, or connecting to my drive, my OneDrive, searching images, or again, browsing through my own device. As before, we can also set the timer to determine how long we want our students participating in that lesson, if we are using it for a station rotation model, or if we're maybe doing a challenge to try and find as many words as they can in that period of time. And then once I'm ready to play, here we go. Now you'll see my timer hasn't started yet. As soon as a student makes a move clicking anywhere on the screen, it'll initiate the timer. With all of the activities, they can be played on the boards, so that interactive touch component, or students can play them on their own device. So if you're in a class that has Chromebooks or PCs or any other kind of personal computers that students have access to, they can simply use their mouse just as the touchpad and still play in the same way. So with this, I would then have to search for my words. and I would just try to locate and then pull. Now you'll notice I didn't enable my word list, so now I can't even see what words I'm supposed to be looking for, so there's that extra added element of it being a little bit challenging. Oh, but I do see the word cow. I would just drag over. I'm going to go back and edit just real quick. Get that word list back. So back in my customized content, go ahead and enable my word list, update my preview. Now, if I were doing this in my class and I realized my kiddos weren't able to find those words, I might want to take a second, edit it out, and maybe reduce the size of my grid so that then there's fewer distracting letters. Makes them a little bit bigger, it's a little easier for those little ones to see. Or if I had my big kids, I could add more letters to it, make it a little bit more challenging. So again, I apologize, my slow internet connection. So now I have my word list. I have the words that I'm trying to locate. And as I'm locating, if I can find one, I simply just drag my mouse or my cursor or my finger, if I were playing this on a board, trying to connect those words. And of course, I can't see any of them. Let's look. Oh, I think I saw rooster. So there's rooster. So I drag it. When they are correct, you'll see that it changes color. It also crosses that word out from the list. If a student was looking for a word and it was incorrect, you'll see that the line simply disappears. Nothing shows up. They can't access any of it. The words do appear, as you notice, kind of forwards and backwards. They also do appear diagonally. So it does make it an added challenge of really having to look for the lettering. So it's a great tool for helping develop those language skills, especially helping with spelling. I can see a lot of teachers who would use this in a world language class where they were trying to help students spell words that were in a different language from what they were a native speaker to. So it's a great opportunity for that. So that was the Scramble lesson type. The one thing that I really loved about these two lesson templates is the amount of time that it would also save me as a teacher. So if I go back to my lessons, you'll see I created both of those separately with two different sets of vocabulary content. For the most part, granted, they were the same words. But with my class, I know that time's valuable. I know you all know that as teachers, that time's our most precious commodity. And oftentimes I didn't have a lot of time to put into creating multiple different activities, but I still wanted to reinforce those skills. One of the great features of using Snowflake is at any time you can duplicate a lesson and then change it and edit it. So within our community, we have so many great lessons that have been created by our team, that have been created by other teachers, but I'm going to show you my favorite cheat for using Scramble and Guess. So I use these very frequently in my middle school classroom, and to save me a little bit of time, it was kind of like two birds with one stone. So I would create a lesson. So we'll go back to that demo 1 lesson that I created. And, trying to not reinvent the wheel, I would maybe then duplicate that lesson. Now you'll see I have that copy of it. So it's going to be the same thing, just a straightforward copy. I'm going to go and edit though. So in this one, it was a guess. So this was our lesson we created using that guess lesson template where students have to guess the letters of the word. Really great for reinforcing spelling. I am going to very simply change this lesson to another template. And this is where Scramble and cards have a really great overlap. If I go to Scramble, I have an entirely different lesson. All of my content is still there, and I didn't have to change anything. I didn't have to add anything. I didn't have to edit anything. All I had to do was change the lesson type, and it gave me that real quick cheat where I still have the same information I want my kiddos to learn, but now I have 2 lessons that they could use it in. So this, again, would be another activity that when working with my middle schoolers, I would have maybe my board set up into the 2 zones where I would have guess on one side and a scramble on the other. My kiddos are getting the same set of words, they're still learning those same skills, but they're doing it in 2 different lesson activities. So there's that level of novelty to it. They're excited about doing something different, and then they would switch. They get the repetition of learning those words again, but they're doing it now in a different template. Once I've created a lesson, I have the option to save it to the community. So in the community, you can save this with all the other teachers. Once you've saved to community, then anybody has access to the lesson that you've created. I also have the option where I can send it to my students. So one of our webinars that we'll be hosting later on will be about creating classes and sending assignments to students. That's an option that I have. My students would then play that lesson on their own personal device. So it could be on their Chromebooks or on their computers. They could play it in the classroom, or I can assign it as homework that they'd have to complete later. So I'm going to go back to my lessons, and I'll show you one more option that we have after having created our lessons. There we go. So in my lessons that I've created, I do have the option where I can, like I showed you, I could send it to students, I can send it to the community. I also have the option where I can add it to a list. So maybe I have a variety of lessons for a math unit that I've created a list for. Once I select Add to List, I have the option of the different lists that I've created. I can add it to any of those lists. I can create a new list, and then it just keeps my lessons in a nice category so I have easy access to it. Then when I am playing on my Snowflake board, I can just pull up my lessons by their lists, and I can run all of the lessons so that they continuously flow, and my students can play a variety of them in one setting, or I can set it up so that there would be, again, those different zones. So that's the other option for the lessons that we've created. I know that that was a lot of info. I know that that was a whole bunch at once. So I'm here if you have any questions, anything you'd like to know about how to use the guest lesson template or the Scramble lesson template.
Maybe I'm going a little bit farther. You spoke of sending to the students.
Yes.
How many lessons can you send to the students? Only one?
Nope, you can send multiple lessons at once. So I've never tested the limit of exactly how many you can send. I know with my middle schoolers, I think the most I had at one point was maybe about a dozen, just because I didn't want it to clutter. Usually I would send it. When we were finished with it, I would then remove that lesson from their ability.
Just to know the limits, okay?
I'm not, that's a really good question, and I would have to follow up on it. So I will look into that and get back to you, because I don't know the exact limit of how many you can send to your kids.
Then, I don't know if you know, I'm not a teacher, so
okay.
I don't have the experience you have and so forth. Another question I have, when you send to the student the lesson, do they need to be have a license of the Snowflake, or how does that work?
Hopefully I will answer this correctly. Jack, if at any point you have something you want to jump in and say. I know that when a teacher has their license for their account, they are able to create classes with their students. I don't know the exact number of how many students they have a licensing for, but I'm not sure. Jack, do you have an answer for that by chance?
There should be no limit on the number of students that can come into the product if the teachers have built a class. So they can build a class using like Google Sign-On, Google Single Sign-On. They can build a class by just going in and building your own classes, and that should not have a limit to it, because every school has different numbers of students. And just so that, Danielle, so that you're aware, Rafael is our partner in Dominican Republic.
Oh, fantastic.
In fact, I have to correct you in Latin America.
Okay.
Do you have any, did that answer your question, Rafael?
I'll have to check that out and do it by myself to see how it works, so I can check it out and really learn it. Because mainly when I have to go to the schools and do some training and things like that, so I want to be sure how to do things correctly. That's why I ask this type of questions.
No, it's a great question.
So actually, you can go in and make your own classes and all. I have personally made one with 35, and it's not been a problem. I haven't gone over that because in the U.S. it's pretty unusual to have one higher than that. But I know in other places the classes are larger, and some of our elective classes are larger than that. So I would go ahead and just try out as many as you would like. Also,
excuse me, Jack. Let me ask you this. For example, in this case, in Dominican Republic, we have a license with the panels. Okay, so with that license, can you include that all the students of your class with that license, or how does it work? That's what I do not understand at this point yet.
Okay, so what I will do is I will get written information to you and get that back to you. But you have the ability to create a class, but I'll get specifics for you, specifically for your contract, and get that to you along with instructions on how to do it.
Because something that I find interesting is that when you have a interactive panels, front of the class interactive panel, and maybe you can have the students follow you up, doing the same stuff over at their own device, and that, I think that's interesting.
Yes, so you can, but yeah, and I think I can have some people that are there show you how also if that needs to be done. But I can get you those specifics and I'll get it over to you. Okay. We do have another question from Marial, who says, what kind of content would you recommend to use with Scramble in high school?
With Scramble for high school, I could see a lot of teachers wondering that same question. That's a really good question. What I would probably recommend is for a lot of those vocabulary words that you see in certain content-specific areas that are more challenging. It would help reinforce those words. By reinforcing those words, you then help students kind of reinforce what those concepts could be and the definition of those words. Usually, whenever I had my students using this activity, once they found a word, they then had to tell me the definition of that word. So it made them kind of go back, rethink about what did we learn? Okay, what does this word mean? How can I use it? I could also see a lot of high school classes using this in their world languages. This would be really great for not only students who are not native English speakers, but students who are studying a foreign language and maybe having some of those difficulties remembering certain, what's the word I'm thinking of? Certain like spelling rules that are very specific to certain languages. So I could see that being used there as well. I hope that answers your question.
By any chance, for example, in the Scramble, when you find the correct word, does it pronounce it or something like that for a foreign student? So you can hear the pronunciation. Is that available in this type of activity or not?
Not in the Scramble lesson type. In other lesson features that we have, there's the ability to add sound. And with adding sound, you could then have it be like the pronunciation of a word. So if you were using maybe the cards lesson template, when they flipped over the card, it would also say the word to you.
So I will add in my recommendation from a pedagogical standpoint would be that you use that activity in conjunction with something else that you've planned to go along with your lesson for the day. So like Danielle was saying, I'm thinking for secondary school, for high school, if I was doing preparation for a college board exam or some type of college entrance exam and was looking at higher level vocabulary words, I would use the activity to get them kind of warmed up and going and find the words and then make them find the definition, as Danielle said, and possibly use them in a sentence in the correct way. So you're using a game and you're also taking paper and using a number of different things that you could have in your classroom in order to bring everything together. And I think it's important when we're looking at any of these activities that we're sharing in the webinars that we try to think of how we might use them differently than what we just first see when we glance at them. So how would you take that and put it in the entire ecosystem of a classroom and of your day and use it to enhance what you're doing?
I think it would be, hi, hello.
Hello.
I think it would be awesome to, I was thinking as I was listening to you, Jack, and it was interesting to see that because it's true. Like, for example, like you can make it as challenging or as simple as you can. So the idea is that, for example, some students could be using the Scramble to find words that then later they can use in a writing piece, or maybe they can define if they're lower level, or maybe they can just write sentences with them. Depends on the amount of work you're working with, or the type of content you're working with. So I think it's very valid what you're saying. I like it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think if we start looking at using the lesson activity models that we have within Snowflake in various manners. So say we built a lesson, Danielle's built this lesson with vocabulary words in it. So you have your students find the words, they're familiarizing themselves with spelling, with the words themselves. Then you say, okay, now you produce a lesson activity using sentences or using some other activity that's in the wheelhouse that we have, and have them do something that shows that they understand the context in which they could use the word or the definition, so that they're not only repeating something, but they're making, because we know as students make, they have a much higher level of retention. So it's a matter of just how do we tie things in and bring things together using all of the stuff that we have.
Yes, absolutely. And it is really easy for students to be able to create content using our templates. That was something I did with my middle schoolers very regularly, where they would create their own activities for review, maybe in preparation for a test that was coming up. And it's so straightforward and easy to navigate that those sixth graders, they were experts after 5 minutes of opening it up and playing with it. They knew how to add in their own words. They knew how to change settings. I mean, these kids today are very tech savvy, and this is a really easy platform for them to navigate. And then by creating, it makes that lesson a lot more meaningful. It requires them to use a lot more higher thinking skills. When I did it with my students, I also made them kind of explain, well, what are you doing with this lesson? How are you going to use this lesson to review? Like, how could this help somebody? And then they would have to explain to me, well, they could, somebody could do X, Y, and Z while playing this lesson. So it gave them that opportunity just to think about their own style of learning and of thinking, a piece of almost like metacognition.
Do we have any other questions? And if you guys, when you're doing the questions, if you could direct them to me. My name on the list is John Reed. Direct them to me. I'm able to read them and then share them with Danielle so that she doesn't have to try to read questions at the same time. Well, Danielle, I would like to thank you for this evening.
Yeah, thank you.
And I would like to thank everybody that signed on for signing on. We will be having our webinars every Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, yes. 8 o'clock Atlantic Time, and 6 o'clock Central Time. I believe it's midnight London time. So around the world, we are open to have you join us. We will also be posting the videos. If you have any questions during the meantime, please feel free to contact us. My email would be jr@nuiteq.com. So NUITEQ. Feel free to email, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. And thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
I believe Kelly will be leading our webinar next week, so you'll hear from a different person on our staff that has spent quite a bit of time building lessons within Snowflake. Yep,
and Kelly makes some really amazing, beautifully done content, so I look forward to seeing how she is going to present her webinar next week.
So, oh boy, no pressure. Thank you.
All right, thank you all very much, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank
you. See you next week. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.